A Zen meditation teacher is here to enlighten us on everything we want to know.
Time to awaken the lion.
Hello, Sentient Beans, and welcome to Be Brave, where I make videos on Buddhism, mindful living, and everything in between. So today we have a special guest with us, Daishin Eric McCabe. Daishin has been practicing Zen meditation for more than 15 years and have been ordained as a Buddhist monk in the Soto Zen tradition since 2004. He has trained under Abbess Daishin Benage of Mount Equity Zendo in Pennsylvania, as well as in France under the guidance of well-known spiritual teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. He has many years of experience teaching meditation in various settings and have completed chaplaincy. Right now he teaches meditation at Bralons here in Des Moines. Is that right?
Yes.
He is a good friend of ours here at Dizangqi Buddhist Group and have taught us meditation here on more than a few occasions. Welcome, Daishin.
Thank you. It's good to be here, Kara.
It's an honor to have you here and sitting down with me talking about Buddhism.
Well, it's an honor to be in the space that your mother has created for us all to come together and practice, and I think she's done a tremendous amount. She puts a lot of energy and her time into opening her home for the Buddha Dharma, and that to me is really inspiring.
So for everyone who don't know, this is a retreat center. Well, and it's also we have like a weekly practice group, and the place is also our residence. So people come here every Sunday to like practice Buddhism, study Buddhism, and so on. It's been really fun, and we created this community where everyone can, come and gather.
I have to say, I'm inspired by the devotional element of practice here. In the West, Buddhism is often associated, rightly so, with mindfulness, and we don't see as much particularly among Western practitioners. It's the level of devotion is more geared towards scientific kind of practice, but that's not absent here either. However, there is a strong sense of wanting to understand the heart, and I am inspired by the ethnicity that is here. When Buddhism came from China, came from India, came from Japan and from Korea, Thailand, Cambodia, Vietnam, all of the countries in that part of the world. And it's just recently, within the past century, been moving into Western countries. And it's hard, I think, for us to imagine what practice would be like in its countries of origin. And I think Dizangqi gives us a little flavor of what Buddhism looks like in terms of practice in the countries of its origin. So I'm really grateful that there is this space here set up like it is.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that's also like what's unique about this group is that it brought over traditional Chinese Buddhism that's practiced there, and then bringing it over here to the West. I think like one of the things like prostration is kind of difficult for Western people of a Western background to accept something like that, like bowing to something, because of idolatry in Christianity. Like there's something innate in them that I can't bow down to something, but I can't put myself down. I want to learn, but I don't want to put myself on the ground for that. So it's been interesting. There's some like clashes, really serious clashes when we like try to introduce it to people here. But yeah,
Well, just to talk about that whole issue around bowing, and I think that's a good place for me to begin, because
sure.
bowing, it does. I think you're right. We associate bowing with bowing to God in the West, and here in a Chinese style Buddhist temple, we don't have we don't have God here. We have images of Buddha. And so it looks like we're bowing to Buddha. But actually, for Westerners, we have to make a kind of internal change, a change in our mind when we bow. The bowing is not to a god. We're not making Buddha into a god. In fact, Buddha himself said he is not a god. He's just a human being. And he happens to be a very well-developed human being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So when we're bowing to Buddha, actually we're bowing to that part of ourself that is the most awakened within us. And by bowing, we're bringing it forward. We're nourishing the seeds of awakening, of wisdom, and of compassion within us by the physical act of bowing. So I found bowing a very precious practice for me right from the start. And when I first started practicing in 1995, and I was really impressed with a particular school, especially in Korea. I learned, and actually here in China as well, there is the practice of doing 108 prostrations daily. And some schools of Buddhism even do more than that.
Do you do bowing in the Zen tradition?
We do bow. Bowing is a huge part of our practice. And another thing that my teacher explained to me is that in order to bring about the highest in ourself, we have to be able to go down low. We have to. So it's kind of this paradox. In order to be really high, we have to be willing to be humble and low. And so by putting ourselves into the lowest position possible, we're bringing the greatest part of ourselves out. Because none of us is perfect. And by lowering ourselves, we are acknowledging we're acknowledging our imperfections, our faults, but we're not staying there either. We're lifting ourselves back up and making that strong, having that strong, with a strong desire to be more than just those the lowest part of ourselves. But we have to remember that we are both human beings, where we have faults, we make mistakes, and we are also these great beings that can see clearly the nature of reality, but also have great kindness. And we really need we need to develop the ability to have compassion and kindness in our world. It's so necessary, especially right now.
So that brings me to my first question. What is Zen? You mentioned, I know this is a big question, and you mentioned bowing down and putting yourself down low, but in order to receive more wisdom. Kind of like, I hear the analogy a lot of an empty cup instead of a full cup, because when it's full, you can't put anything in it.
Right.
So does Zen have that kind of philosophy in its fundamental?
Yes, there's a great story. It's a very famous story of a Zen master talking with a scholar of Buddhism one afternoon, and they were drinking tea together, and the scholar was talking a lot about his understanding of Buddhism to the Zen master, and then he asked the master his opinion, and the master saw that his cup was empty, so he proceeded to fill the scholar's cup up with tea, but he didn't stop once the tea had filled to the top of the cup, to the rim. And the scholar was holding this tea in his hands, and the tea began to overflow over the cup and onto his hands, onto the table, and the scholar he wanted to be polite, and at first he didn't say anything, and finally he noticed that the teacher just kept pouring, and he said, "Stop, don't you see what you're doing? My cup is overfilling." And the master said, "In the same way, I can't give you anything because your cup is too full." In other words, your mind is too full of ideas, of thoughts, of concepts, of reality, that I can't give you anything. If you want to learn something, then you need to empty your cup. And that's a symbol for what all of us really need to do when we come to Zen practice or any Buddhist practice, or actually really any endeavor, even things that we've been doing for years. We need to have the ability to empty our minds of previous ideas, of past learning, so that we can continue to learn. In Zen practice, we say that there's a famous saying from one of the earliest teachers to bring the practice of Soto Zen to the United States, Shunryu Suzuki Roshi, who said that in the expert's mind there are few possibilities, but in the beginner's there are many. And so our practice is to always maintain that beginner's mind, to come back to the start. And the way one of my teachers says it is that we need to have what's called kindergarten mind, the mind that is open, flexible, curious. The curiosity is absolutely key to our practice.
Absolutely, and I think what scares people a lot is that beginner's mind makes them seem weak and vulnerable. Like they're not knowledgeable, they're dumb. They don't know anything. Like many people nowadays when we interview, we want to like showcase ourselves and like say, oh, I know I've done this and this, and so that's just like really opposite of the beginner's mind. Like instead of knowing everything, you know nothing. Like,
right.
You're ready to accept everything.
Yes.
It's so different from like our society, the way of thinking.
It's very, very different. So I was practicing early on. I trained with my teacher for 1 year. This was in 1998, and then she suggested that I practice in California for a year at Tassajara Zen Mountain Center, which is one of the largest monasteries, Soto Zen monasteries in the United States, and certainly the oldest. And prior to going there, I trained for 3 months with a Zen teacher named Nonin Koweni Roshi, who's at the Nebraska Zen Center. And he taught me a lot of wonderful, really helpful things. There weren't easy things for me to hear, but he had a definite skill in helping us to release preconceived ideas and notions. And I remember one time, so I had been practicing at that point, I had been practicing between practicing on my own and with my teacher for maybe about 4 years or so, and I had done a lot of meditation retreats, and we were engaged at that point, that particular weekend, in a weekend retreat. It was a 2-day called a sesshin, where we sat in meditation for maybe about 8 to 10 hours a day. And at the end of one evening, Nonin Roshi was doing having interviews with the students that were present there, and I went to see him, and I wasn't really sure what question to ask him or what to say, but he resolved my question very soon in the interview. I went to see him. I sat down, and he said to me, "You know nothing." Just like that. That was the only thing he said. He said some other things too, but that really struck me. He's very direct.
Like the first thing he said when he saw you.
And I came there thinking I knew something about Zen.
And how long have you been practicing Zen at this point?
At that point, I had already been practicing about 4 years.
Oh, okay. So and how old were you?
I was...
what year was this?
This was in 1999. So I was maybe 23, 24 years
right
old.
Out of college?
Right out of, yeah, about the third year out of college.
Okay.
And I thought, and also I was a religion major in college, so I'd studied all of the world religions. I'd studied Buddhism.
Right.
So I thought I knew something. Actually, I wasn't conscious with how much my own prior training was getting in the way of my ability to meditate. Meditate. It wasn't like a conscious thing, and that's the benefit of a teacher, is that they can see where you're at in your practice before you are able to see that. So it brings to light a skillful teacher can bring to light your faults sooner than you would by yourself. And that was the case here when he said, "You know nothing." I didn't understand it at the moment when he was saying that to me. Shortly afterwards, I went back to the zendo, the practice place where we sat in meditation to sit, and I could physiologically feel my mind had let go of something, and it wasn't something that I consciously did, but it was thanks to the interaction with the teacher.
Like maybe pride.
Pride. Yeah, pride was a big.
That's the biggest one. Wow. Yeah. So you mentioned that you studied religion in university, and you double majored, right?
Right.
In is it divinity?
Biology.
Biology
and religion.
And religion. Yeah. Okay. What got you into Zen? Did it start in college?
It did start in college. There's a number of things that came together. Part of it was simply the academic studying of religion. I was brought up Catholic, and as I studied various other world religions, and I could see that there were a lot of ways to look at what we call the divine, or to even just to be in the world. And Buddhism is just one other way. But I had a particular class, it was called the philosophy of religion, where we were engaged in studying thought about religion, and one of the topics in that class was the arguments that you can make to prove God's existence. And what I learned from that was that actually you can't prove that God exists or not. Or not.
Yeah. But you can't even prove that Buddha exists, I think. Can you? I don't know. Like, it could be, I heard theories that he's made up. Or there are like many people.
Right.
Him.
And this isn't really the central, this isn't really why anybody comes to religion in the first place. Anyway, it's not to get involved in philosophical debates. It's because we're suffering on some level that we come to a spiritual practice. And so taking those classes helped to bring out some of the things that I was struggling with internally, but also being in a relationship with a girlfriend that I had, and that relationship, especially once it ended, caused tremendous pain, and my heart was really hurting. So I wasn't looking to philosophically solve problems as much as I was for finding some relief to my pain.
But I would think an academic class wouldn't do much in the way of actually applying Buddhist concepts in your daily life. Like, it's really academic, really dry, really objective. So did you glean something from that?
Well, I did, in fact, because the teachers that taught it were also not just coming from their head. They also had they were practitioners, not necessarily what we do here, but they had their own spiritual practice, and it came out in their warmth They were very caring and concerning, in fact, very inspiring for me. And if I hadn't had that academic training at the beginning, right at that point, I don't think I could have become a priest.
Right.
I think it's helpful for Westerners to have some kind of foundational intellectual understanding of Buddhism prior to actually engaging it. I mean, that's a doorway. It's not the only doorway, but it's a doorway to entering practice.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think many people are interested in the philosophy first, and then they start getting to like the practice and actually using it. So why Zen though? Like I would think you study Buddhism as a like in a broad scope. So why did you choose Zen?
Well, it's because I found my teacher at university, my Zen teacher. She had been teaching meditation, Zen meditation, on the university campus in the chapel.
Yeah.
Actually, she had been teaching it for I didn't meet her until the end of my third year. But she had been teaching it the whole time that I was going to university, and I had no idea, because my antenna was not pointed in that direction when I first came to college.
Yeah.
I was getting into trouble, drinking, drugs,
in
partying,
the relationship.
Yeah. So but then thanks to the suffering that came about, and when really not wanting to go further down a path of destruction, and also the taking of religion classes, I knew there are other ways to deal with things and to live and to be. And so meeting my teacher was just a verification that, there's another way to live. And so I first met her at the end of my junior year. I only had a few weeks left of school. And I learned I just had learned at that point that she had been teaching Zen. And this was right after the time where I was really confused about God, and had taken this class on the philosophy of religion, and just turned my mind upside down.
And sorry, you were Catholic up until this point, and you're trying to solve your problems using Catholic sense of like.
Right, and I just found that my issues were not being resolved in that way. Not that they couldn't have been, or they're not. I think there's a lot of great resources within the Catholic tradition, but I found the need for this practice of Zen meditation. It filled me in a way that the practices that I'd been doing within Catholicism, up till that point, it just didn't fill me. So when I met my teacher, I lost my train of thought.
I thought you were going to say something profound. I was waiting for it. So was she a Buddhist nun? A certified teacher?
So yeah, she was a Buddhist nun. She was from central Pennsylvania, and but she had trained American. She had lived in Japan for 23 years, and she had trained in Japanese Zen monasteries for 15 of those years, and her whole being spoke to me. It wasn't just her words, and she was able to speak in a way that was compassionate, and by the tone of her voice. And I left there feeling better than I'd ever felt before. And I wasn't doing any drugs. I wasn't drinking. I didn't do anything special other than I sat down with my teacher. She gave me an explanation of how to do Zazen, which is Zen meditation. We sat in silence and in stillness for 2 periods of 15 minutes. We did walking meditation.
Just you and her one-on-one?
And there may have been 1 or 2 other people there. And then we shared a book. The title itself was a teaching to me. Being Nobody, Going Nowhere. Because at that time...
That reminds me of a Beatles song, like Nowhere Man or something.
Nowhere Man.
Do you know it?
How's it go?
nowhere man, he's coming, or like it's basically saying we're all nowhere man, like we're not going anywhere. We don't have any goals. It reminds me
and
of that.
John Lennon was also very influenced by Zen Buddhism through his experience
I wouldn't be surprised.
In Japan, from my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
But so this book, here I was in college, being cultivated to be somebody and to go somewhere, and now I was confronted with the possibility of what could it mean to be nobody and to go nowhere? What does that actually mean, and how do you do it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it just made me reversed my thinking about what it means to have success in our life. Just a really, for me, it was a very life-changing experience when I first met my teacher. And from that point forward, I knew I wanted to continue practicing Zen meditation. I didn't know where it would lead, and I didn't think about being a priest at that time. I knew it satisfied something in me deep that wasn't getting satisfied or addressed anywhere else.
Yes.
And another thing, interestingly, there's all kinds of physical benefits to meditation.
Oh yeah.
And during that year and the year previous, I had been waking up in the morning with beds. My whole body would be sweating, but my head in particular was just dripping with sweat. My whole pillow would be sopping wet.
Uh-huh.
And that once I started practicing meditation, that stopped.
Oh, you had that for your whole life, like?
No, it was something that had started maybe about a year and a half earlier.
I see.
And I don't know what the cause was, but I knew I was waking up with bed sweat, like sweating profusely.
Wow.
Just mainly in my head.
Yeah.
From my head, and my pillow would be soaked. But then once I started practicing meditation, that stopped. So I thought, this is really interesting. Another thing my teacher said was that you might not notice the differences in you when you begin meditation, but those who are close to you might notice the differences before you do.
Yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
And I was really surprised when a friend of mine, after a few months of practicing, a friend of mine said, "Eric, you seem different. What have you been doing?"
Oh, did he pinpoint like what exactly is different about you?
Well, he noticed something different about me. He noticed I was
peaceful.
happier.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you started doing Zen meditation after you met your teacher, what in terms of relationships is different since you started doing Zen? Like you mentioned, you were in a relationship that was kind of not so great. Mm-hmm. Did you look at relationships differently? More specifically, like of an opposite gender relationship. Like, is it because a lot of my audience are younger people, like more college age or high school age, and we're all very confused about relationships. Like, it's very easy to fall into it and just get lost in it.
Right.
How do you see relationships now? Like, and how can like the Zen concepts in Zen help like maintain your mindfulness in relation?
Great question. And I think relationship is a great place to practice in. It's actually a way to develop, to cultivate ourselves spiritually. Because we find in relationships that our partner is not there to make us necessarily, to give us what we want. And they reflect back to us, in many cases, our own egos, our own neediness. And so that can become the grounds for practice. So in the relationship that I was in college, that went really, really sour quickly. I was lucky that Zen gave me a tool to reflect on myself and to see what went wrong here. Why do I feel this terrible? And thanks to studying not only Buddhism but religion as a whole and ethics, I realized that I will. First of all, I made a vow to myself never to get into another relationship without knowing, knowing the person better and having a sense of what their values, what they value.
Very important.
Yeah. So what does the person we want to be? I mean, we might be physically attracted to somebody, and that's natural. And that might be the beginning of a relationship. And sometimes it's really hard to see beyond that physical attraction. I mean,
especially when you're young.
When you're young, and it's very, very powerful. And you may not know yourself what your values are at a young age.
Yes.
But as you're in a relationship with somebody, your values will come about. It'll become clearer to you what you value and what you don't value by being in relationships. So relationships can help us to clarify what we really want in a relationship and what we don't want. So we're bound to make mistakes. It's going to be a painful place at times. It can also be a beautiful place to be. And really the relationship is, we're there for our partner in order to love them, more so than to look for love for them. I mean, it's nice to be loved, but we can't depend on somebody else loving us. We need to make it our practice, make it a priority for us to show the person that we're in a relationship how much we love them. That's really our job. And not so much to look. I mean, it's nice to if we receive that love in return, but there's no guarantee that we'll receive that from another person, especially a human being.
That's what's so scary about love, is that you open yourself up and you're vulnerable, and you can end up getting hurt, very hurt, or receive a lot of love from the other person. So how do you be vulnerable to that? To, like, it's scary to be hurt by someone that you like a lot.
Well, that's where I find the spiritual practice nourishes me, because being in relationship, like you said, does open us up to our own vulnerability, and that's actually a benefit to our spiritual growth, is to touch and to connect with our vulnerability. Because we could either take that vulnerability that we feel and then try to mask it off, wall it off, isolate ourselves from everybody else in the world, and pretend that we're invulnerable and we don't feel pain. But that's really not the purpose of relationship or spiritual practice, but it's to help us to connect more deeply with our vulnerability, because when we're connected with our vulnerability, we're connected to the suffering and the real pain that is in our world around us.
True. It helps you connect and empathize with other people sharing the same suffering.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's really, we want to open our hearts as much. Spiritual practice, relationships help us to open our hearts more to the suffering in the world, so that we can then take some have the motivation. That's where the motivation comes, to take responsibility for the world, and that's also where our livelihood should come from, is that internal motivation to help heal or address the suffering on this planet. And Lord knows we have loads. It's where do we want to direct our energy in this lifetime? We have a limited time which we're alive, and we want to make the most of being born in a human body. So how can we live in a way that addresses suffering, that addresses pain? What work do we want to do to help? And it doesn't have to be a doctor or something like that. It can be as much as just getting the groceries for your grandmother or your mother, or holding a door for somebody. It doesn't have to be such a big thing.
Yeah. I think people often forget that being a Buddhist is not something very doesn't have to be big or glorious, it's really everyday stuff, especially to the people around you, to your family, to your friends. Like, it's what you do for them, It doesn't have to be big, like donating to charity, helping children in Africa. Like you don't have to do stuff like that. Like you should start with what's around you, the everyday, the small things.
Right, and it's not about being Buddhist either. There was a saying, I can't remember who said this.
That's true.
Stop being a Buddhist and start being a Buddha.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
You know? So, and for me, practicing with my teacher daily was a way to move out of a head orientation to a heart orientation, and move out of this idea stage and move into the action stage of how am I actually conducting myself day to day, hour to hour, moment to moment, and am I really living in a way that the Buddha is living in a way, and by that I mean, how am I serving others?
Right. So going off from that, serving others, how do you serve others with objective wisdom? Like, I know you work with families in a hospital setting, and they're suffering a lot, and it's hard. Well, at least for me, I'm like, I feel others' pain, and I empathize with them a lot, but it's very easy to be kind of really feel that emotion, be wrapped up in it, instead of having the distance to see things clearly and to be able to help them in the best way possible. So how do you maintain that objectivity and have compassion at the same time?
That's a really good question. And in our chaplain training, that was a big issue that was addressed.
Yeah.
Because you can't totally block yourself off from somebody else's suffering, even if you don't know them at all. So in a hospital setting, for example, there were, where I was training at, there were shootings going on. It was in the middle of a city, and there were oftentimes gunshot wounds, and somebody would die. And these were not older people; these were young people. And then the whole family would come out and they would be grieving. And my work as a chaplain was then to minister to the family in whatever best way I could. But how do you do that and maintain your equanimity and also be able to share wise things? And first of all, I don't know if you can share any real wisdom when people are really suffering. Perhaps the best thing you can do for somebody who's suffering a lot is to be there for them, to be with them in their pain, to not try to make it better really quickly.
Right.
Because there's a desire in all of us to make the pain go away as quickly as possible, because we don't want to feel it.
I know. It's actually our problem.
It's our problem.
Like, we don't want to stay with you down there.
Right. We don't want to stay with that. But that's the role of the Bodhisattva Jizo, right? Kshitigarbha or Dijang.
Yeah.
So that is the role of that Bodhisattva, is the Bodhisattva that dwells in hell.
Right.
And
the worst place.
Right, go to the worst place. And you don't necessarily try to fix people's pain or change people. You don't try to lead them to a better way of thinking, because you can't just pull somebody out of their suffering, but you can be a companion through it for them, be there for them. And that takes a tremendous amount of emotional strength to do that, I think, for a caregiver. It's very depleting. And that's another reason why I lean on not only my spiritual practice, but good friends. The Buddha said, the Buddha was asked by Ananda, his cousin, one day. Ananda said to him, "World honored one, I heard it said that good friends are half of the great way." And the Buddha said to Ananda, "Do not say that, Ananda. Oh. Good friends are all of the great way."
What? Really?
Yes.
Wow. So like good advisors and
yes,
mentors.
Right. We need to be able to share our feelings, our frustration, because any of us, a Buddhist priest, doesn't mean I'm immune to suffering.
We're still human.
We're human beings, and if we're being effective, as in the case of a chaplain or a priest, our job is to act like sponges and soak up people's grief. Yeah. That's why you see the images of Hote, the Buddha, very, very fat, It's because he
Yeah.
eats people's suffering. And that's why he's so
Oh.
fat.
Is that the Buddha that has a lot of merit?
Right.
And the long ear
Long
lobe?
earlobes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know him. Yeah.
So that Buddha is so fat because he's eating people's suffering. But
Oh, I didn't know that's why he's so fat.
but if you take on other people's suffering like a sponge, then you also need to wring that sponge out.
Yeah, I mean, like, you'll have a lot of, like, mental weight on you.
Right.
Like, oh my gosh, I hear all these terrible stories every day. How do you let go?
So then we need to find ways to wring the sponge out
Is
so that
it
we
like
can.
talking with other people, or can you meditate and make it, like, just go?
Well, I don't think there's one way, but that's
Okay.
that's talking with people,
Okay.
meditating,
Yeah.
finding your own way to let it go. Maybe you need to go on a retreat, whatever it is. Everybody's going to be different there.
Yeah.
I talk with one. I would see a psychologist. We were encouraged as chaplains to go to a psychologist while we were in training, and
Like
I
a
found
therapist?
a therapist.
Okay.
Yeah, and this person suggested to me, finding a way to deal with that. So he gave me his own example. Where anytime he would drive over the bridge to go back home, he would imagine all of the things that people were giving him,
Yeah.
emptying into the river. So we can use our imaginations. We're not.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be
it's
just
that
one.
easy. So it's like.
Well, for him,
Goodbye.
yeah.
Yeah, for him, okay. How about for you?
For me, that's a good question. I think talking with people is helpful,
Yeah.
and sitting, meditation is very helpful. Also, yoga practice is very helpful.
Sure.
Because we don't just hold things in our head, in our minds. We don't hold experience in our head. We hold it throughout our body.
Right.
And when
Like
we
there's tension.
there's tension in the body.
Yeah.
And so by doing mindful movements, we are opening parts of our body that had been closed. So for example, if we're loaded up with grief, or we feel the weight of responsibility, oftentimes our shoulders will reflect that.
Yes.
So our shoulders may be hunched.
Yeah.
So doing yogic practices that help to open the chest and lower the shoulders can be very effective in releasing that.
Right.
And then just sitting with that, being in that open place. There's a saying of Zen Master Dogen in his Fukan Zazengi: if you want to do such a thing, then be such a person. Right? How does he say it? If you want, so he was talking in terms of sitting meditation, and how in the Zen school of Buddhism, meditation isn't stage by stage, step by step. We start out as Buddha. We don't start out as lowly human beings. I mean, we are that too. But when we practice sitting like a Buddha. And so Dogen says, if you want to be a Buddha, then you have to act like a Buddha. And so we have to be willing to bring our mind to this, to our own enlightenment, to develop trust and faith in our own inherent enlightenment. And this isn't just Buddhist thinking. I recently came across a quote by William James, who is a Western psychotherapist or psychologist.
Yeah.
But he wrote a famous book called The Varieties of Religious Experience. And he was quoted as saying something to the effect of, if you want to be a certain way, try the as-if approach. So in other words, act as if you are already where you want to be. And so in a sense, we need to take a leap to Buddhahood.
Like, I can think, I'm already enlightened.
Right.
Is that,
we
you
can
can do it?
we can start there. In fact, my and Nonin Koeni Roshi in Nebraska, he said to us one time, we don't sit to attain enlightenment. We sit because we are enlightened.
Yeah, like they say, we need to uncover it. It's already within us.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And Dogen too, he said that practice and enlightenment are one. That there is no the saying in Japanese, shusho ichinyo. Shu is practice, sho is enlightenment. Ichinyo, it means are one thing. So practice and enlightenment are one. It's not that you practice meditation, for example, in order to attain something, but the practice itself is the full culmination of enlightenment.
Very interesting and enlightening. Thank you. So right now I would like to read to you some of the questions that people on Reddit have wanted to know. I said that you're coming, and then like people are like, okay, yeah, I have these questions. So I chose a few that were quite interesting, so first from Endless Mike. Where does he see American Zen Buddhism in 10 years?
Oh, that's
his, what's it, Endless Mike.
Where do I see American Zen Buddhism in 10 years? You sound like my father, Endless Mike.
10 years.
Well, I think we need to look at where Buddhism is right now. And that will give us a sense of where it will be going. So what do we want Buddhism to look like in 10 years?
Yeah.
We need to start practicing right now in the ways that we want to see it manifesting. So for me, my goal is to offer meditation, yoga, Japanese Zen calligraphy, and to be a spokesperson for Dharma, to do public talks. And I've already started doing those things. And I'd also like to continue to address Buddhist perspective on climate change. Because these are the issues that are really, they've
like
driven...
hot button topics.
It's very important that we address real issues in our world. Thich Nhat Hanh, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh says, even if we're using Buddhist words and Buddhist teachings, if it doesn't somehow address real life concerns, then it's not Buddhism.
Yeah.
So we need to be addressing the real concerns of the world. And right now, climate change is huge. Also, race relations in our country is huge.
Yeah.
So looking at what are Buddhist practices that are effective in not only addressing the way the mind works, but our social issues, our injustices in the world. What are the Buddhist teachings that can help us to deal with that or work through it? Or Buddhism has a lot of resources that we can use to address these issues.
Yeah, the answers are all there.
So I see us doing more of that kind of work in the future. If Buddhism is going to survive, we need to continue to move in that direction and connect with society, connect with culture, connect with non-Buddhist organizations.
Yeah, like interfaith.
Interfaith is very important.
Yeah. I think that's why Thich Nhat Hanh is so great, is because he made it so palatable. Buddhism is so palatable to not only like American Buddhists, but like everywhere around the world. Like it's very relatable, and it's very it's very immediate, and you can apply it like right away. Next we have that guy 141. What's some ways to adapt Zen in a difficult household situation? How does Zen deal with elements of shadow projection and negative psychological emission, for lack of a better term? I'm having trouble keeping myself out of negative situations with a close family member who has issues with me, and I don't know how to engage with this person and keep myself from being pulled into the negativity and surreal mindset. Thank you for the post. Sorry if this is too much. This is a pretty typical situation, right? If someone has a negative mindset, and it kind of pulls you in, and it's a close family member, so you can't get away. Perfect
opportunity for spiritual cultivation. In fact, we need those kinds of situations to address in order to drive us to practice, because it's not just the other person that has the problem, but they're holding up, if you can imagine, a mirror. They're holding up a mirror to our own mind. And so when we look at somebody else as being very negative, they're actually reflecting back our own state of mind. So if we're really practicing, we need to address ourselves and our own mind in this situation. I'll give you an example of this in my own life. When I first started practicing with my teacher, Diane Roshi at Manakuri Zendo, one of the first things she taught me to do was to take pride in washing dishes. Washing dishes can be a really profound practice. And it was, as a kid growing up, I was never interested. I didn't like to wash the dishes. No, I don't know any kids that. Yeah, but in a Zen temple, it's a spiritual practice. And there's even a Zen story about washing the dishes, where a young novice monk goes into to the temple, and the first day he's with his master. They're sitting outside, and he finishes eating his meal, and then he goes to his master and he says, "I finished eating. What should I do now?"
Okay.
And the master says, "Did you wash your bowls?" And the monk said, "No." And the master said, "Go and wash your bowls."
Okay.
That was his teaching. And that is, we think, well, what's so great about that?
Yeah.
That's the teaching. You can find world peace through washing dishes. And so take that. I went home to visit my family after about 3 months of training with my teacher. And I was sitting around the table with my parents, my mother and my father, and they are notorious for, they're very loving, passionate people. My mother is Sicilian, and my father has Irish background, also Norwegian. But the Irish and Sicilian are like fire and oil sometimes, and they can really get into heated debates, what I would call arguments, but they would call conversations. But I'm not. I think that probably is another thing that drew me to a meditation practice, is because I don't like discourses that are heated and inflammatory. And oftentimes, between my mother and father, they still maintain their love for each other, but it could be very inflammatory.
Right.
And so it would cause me inside just all kinds of turmoil. I hated that. But true to form, when I went to visit them, we were sitting around the table having a nice dinner, and true to form, they began arguing about something that I don't even remember what it was. Mm-hmm. It usually wasn't something big. And internally, I noticed, this is where practice comes in, I noticed internally myself thinking, oh, here they go again, doing their thing, and I hate that. I don't want to be here. So I thought, okay, wait a minute. This is where the practice again came in, because my teacher would say, whenever somebody else is pushing our buttons, we need to point the finger. When we point the finger at somebody else, we need to turn the finger around and point it at ourselves. Mm-hmm. And say, okay, how am I involved in this situation? And so I had enough clarity to turn my finger around and point it in myself in that moment.
Yeah.
Just in that moment. And I noticed, well, I asked myself, how am I responsible for this argument? And I looked at the table. I noticed that the plates were there on the table, dirty. And again, I'm going by my first thoughts was, oh shoot, plates are dirty and I don't want to clean them. And then my second thought was, no, wait a minute, this is important. I need to wash the dishes. I don't like washing the dishes, but I need to do it. Ooh. So I took the plates, I took the responsibility of removing the plates from the table and going to the sink, washing them. And my parents stopped arguing. They stopped arguing. And my mother looked over at me and she said to me,
You never wash the dishes.
I never wash. Yeah,
oh, that's why. Okay.
But it's that they noticed some changes in me, and my mother said, "Thank God for Diane." That's my teacher's name. So they noticed that I had changed on some level.
Yeah.
Now, washing the dishes that's just one example. But we need to. It's not just like you get it one time and then that's it. You got to keep. We have to keep, because teachers are everywhere. Anybody who pushes your buttons is a teacher. And so they're helping us to continue to cultivate our own spiritual practice. And I still have teachers. I have plenty of teachers right around me. In fact, working with adolescents are some of my greatest teachers, because they're so raw with their emotions, their feelings, and they reflect back to me my own anxiety, my own fear. And so I need to work even harder, practice even harder in being open to the fact that I have anxiety, that I have fear, that I have anger, that I need to deal with. And it's never about the other person.
It's always you.
It's always us.
Yeah.
It's about us. That's what our spiritual practice is about. It's about us.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll get to you guys. You guys, I'm sure you have some questions. But I thought this question was really interesting, and I think people won't get this unless they've practiced Zen for a while or Buddhism for a while. So Space Noodle with DEL says, does Zen practice accomplish the accomplishments of merit and wisdom? If so, is that attainable in this lifetime using Zen methods, or does it take 3 incalculable eons? If so, are Zen masters omniscient? Well, okay, so there's 3 questions. You asked 3 questions. That's not fair. So you, I guess you can choose.
Well,
so
let me
what
take
he's
that.
asking is, does it accomplish the accomplishments of merit and wisdom, basically?
Well, first of all,
I don't know if you understand his question. I mean, I guess I'm not.
We think that practice. Sometimes we think that it's going to take us forever to practice and see the fruits of our practice of wisdom, compassion. But I would encourage us to think of it in a different way. We've already been practicing for kalpas. We've been practicing for eons up till this moment.
Reincarnation.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a very Buddhist view, an Indian view, that our lifespan goes well beyond just this physical body. And that's a whole nother discussion. But if we look at life in that way, then we've been practicing for eons already.
Yeah.
And it's really time to step up to our own Buddhahood. Right now, don't wait. We need to do it presently.
So to answer Space Noodle, the answer is yes, right?
Yes. Yeah, actually, I would say you already have great wisdom and great virtue. It's just you need to acknowledge that in yourself, affirm it,
right?
Believe in it.
Yeah.
It's in you already.
Yeah.
So just continue to nourish it. That's what our practice is about, is nourishing our virtue.
Your mind is a garden, so you control whatever grows there. Yeah.
Amen.
So questions from the audience. So guys, we have a live audience with us, sitting to my left. They'll have some questions, and so first question, do you guys have any?
Say it's one thing to know a solution to a problem. It's one thing to know how you want to fix it, how it needs to be fixed, and feel okay with it mentally. But a lot of times the problem is still there. They still have the feeling, they still internally struggle with it. Could you give people some advice about how to actually hold that feeling, even if they know how to fix a problem, hold that feeling of having the problem and meditate on that instead of just knowing it intellectually? How could they actually practice with their struggle on a practical level?
So the question was how to practice, how to stay with the problem, and instead of just, I guess, knowing that it's there.
Instead of just knowing how how to fix the problem, how to actually practice with the problem. So not just going, sitting away and just meditating, but how to turn your feelings of the problem into a meditation.
Yeah. Well, it sounds to me part of the issue is that we tend to address problems or issues in our life with our head as opposed to our heart. And so how do we bring our heart into it? Is that?
Yes, that sounds good.
Yeah. So how do we practice with the heart and solve our problems, not just from the head but from the heart? Is that?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that, again, that has to do with maintaining a sensitivity to our suffering, to our pain, to our vulnerability, not creating walls around our feelings. Because, again, the feelings, whatever feelings that we have about a problem, can motivate us to do something about it. So if we cut ourselves off from those feelings, we also cut ourselves off. It's like the fuel line. On the other hand, we can also burn out if we're only using our heart to work from. So we need to be smart about this as well.
Like our limits.
We need to know our limitations with any problem that we encounter. So the breath is a great resource. If we don't have, we're finding ourselves in a moment where we can't sit in meditation for any length of time, then to find our breath and use it as an anchor to find some sense of clarity about the situation, or at least to do no harm in the situation, to not make things worse. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll take one more question.
I know that I've been meditating for a while, so I know I need to sit and breathe, like you breathe and meditation. But yoga, I don't know anything about yoga. Very beginning. Practicing that into my life.
Yoga.
So what makes you want to do yoga?
You were talking about.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I ask is because initially yoga came out of a meditation school. It was started from yogis in India who were feeling a lot of pain from sitting in meditation over long periods of time. Their joints, their knees, their back, it was sore, and so they started to practice yoga, hatha yoga, so to release some of the tension in their muscles and their joints so that they could sit longer. But if you're coming from a sitting practice, so coming from a sitting practice, you might find that you have pain in your body, or even it's caught in muscles, even emotions that are caught in the body. So I think the most important thing for doing a yoga practice is not standing upside down, is not twisting into all kinds of shapes, but developing an awareness, or rooting your awareness in the body, so that whatever position you happen to be in, your mind is present to that position. And that's a Buddhist practice of one of the four foundations of mindfulness, the mindfulness of the body. So when you practice meditation, to do so, or practicing yoga, focus more on keeping your attention rooted in the body. Notice how the mind will jump away from whatever you're doing, as far as in a yoga series goes. It goes off, and then continue to bring your mind back. So I would recommend a gentle practice that isn't moving from one posture to the other. I mean, this is for you, but staying in one posture for, say, at least 10 to 20 seconds, and watching how your mind moves and continuing to bring it back to the body in whatever asana you happen to be holding in that moment. That's my recommendation. We can go into more specifics later.
So using the body to control the mind, almost.
Exactly. Yes, we can.
Outside in.
Outside, yeah, outside in, and that's the Buddhist approach, and that's the same way as when Dogen, Zen Master Dogen says, if you want to be such a person, then act in such a way.
Yeah.
So we start with the body. And Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh would say, if you don't feel happy, if you don't feel like you don't feel happy, then he encourages his practitioners and students to smile.
Yeah.
And because we think that the mind is higher than the body in Western culture. We think mind is better than body.
Yeah.
But we can use the body, we can lead, the body can control the mind. It's hard to control the mind with the mind, but we can control the body and thereby indirectly affect the mind. So based on how we comport ourselves, but also the smile is key to that. Because all we're doing from a physiological perspective, all we're doing is moving the cheek muscles up.
Yeah.
And that's why Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh calls it the yoga of the mouth.
Yeah.
So we start with our body and change from the outside in.
Well, Daishin, thank you so much for this interview. We've all learned a lot. I know I have. So they can visit your website at zenfields.org, right?
Yes.
And there's like all kinds of resources and information on there about Zen Buddhism. You can learn more about Daishin himself. There's like recorded audios of his previous talks at various universities and different centers. It's very interesting. And what else would you like to say about what you do and your website?
Well, the aim, the intention of the website is actually Zen Fields is my way of interfacing with the public in offering meditation, yoga, calligraphy. I also do artwork. My own artwork is on there, but especially to give public talks where I can, and also to really engage seriously about climate change. So that's my aim. Yeah. That's the aim behind Zen Fields. So if you have questions if you want to engage me in that area, that would be awesome. You can see my emails up there as well, and I'd love to have your questions. Or if you if you're local or not, and you want to invite me to go to a place to talk about Zen Buddhism, I'd be happy to do that as well.
So more information in the description below and the link as well. Thank you so much, Daishin. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Kara, for organizing this. It's wonderful.
Thank you.